I thought I'd make this lecture for people who completely don't understand how modular synthesizers work, or for that matter, control voltage. It's really difficult to talk to a normie and tell them about Eurorack synthesizers, modular synthesizers, or for that general, what is control voltage. And really, don't be overwhelmed by how complicated a modular synthesizer is, or for that matter, a Eurorack with all its third-party modules. It is simply, as I coin the term, the flow of control voltage. That is the rudimentary understanding of the modular synthesizer. That's all you really have to know, is that there's a start and its end, and it's a flow of control voltage in order to generate an electronic audio sound. So, if you don't know, a synthesizer is an electronic musical instrument, and I suggest looking this up on Wikipedia as well if you don't know, and it generates an audio signal, and it does that by many ways. And well, when I think about it, the synthesizer first came on the scene in, might have been the 50s, maybe earlier, but accordingly they had to use vacuum tubes and other old technologies. It wasn't until Robert Moog, or you can say Moog, like Vogue. I mean, Van Gogh, Van Gogh, I prefer Moog. Moog, kind of preferred going on the voltage control side of things. And Moog was able to compact the synthesizer into something without control voltage and make it all just buttons and dials and knobs with the keyboard, and that influenced the entire synthesizer market. And so when people talk of synthesizers without those cables in the old method, it's really from what Moog did into the innovation of the market. So rewinding a bit, and again you might have to read this on Wikipedia too, control voltage and its gate is an analog, quote-unquote, method of controlling synthesizers, drum machines, and other similar equipment with external sequencers, which you can. The control voltage typically controls pitch, and the gate signal controls note on, note off. Very, very simple. In other words, control voltage gets an electric voltage pulse and controls the signal, the audio sound, and the instrument itself. It can carry data, it can carry the audio. You can read the Wikipedia article, but it was an old way of controlling the synthesizer until Moog compacted into the Model D. But to this day, we can still use CV and gate, and we can use that to understand how the old methods of a synthesizer worked, and that is still much of a funner way to experiment, and as well, almost a binary way between yes and no to understand its data. So, how electronic audio is generated through the control voltage way is like a train starting to its end. For example, it could start with this is an example here. It could start with a sequencer, and with also as well as the envelope where the gate and the pitch is connected through the oscillator, which is kind of like a pulse, kind of like that. And that pulse is then controlled through the filter to give it that tonal characteristic, out through the amp to increase its loudness, into effect like reverb or delay, into the mixer to control its level, and out through the speaker output. But importantly, it all starts with the envelope to control its attack, decay, sustain, and release of that pulse. And then once you hit it on a keyboard or a sequencer, and again, sequencer could be replaced by a keyboard, you get a sound, whether that's a fake organ noise or a square wave. That's the basis of how electronic audio is generated. And CV, just like a train, gets from the caboose to the conductor and all patches its way, quote unquote, as a line of cable to cable to cable to its final output of the audio getting out. And so the modular synthesizer compared to the actual compact synthesizer is separate modules of functions. And like I said, from oscillator to filter to amplifier, these are all separated out. In a way, the modular synthesis was kind of the oldest method after the whole tubes and things like that. And Moog tried to at least made his own system. And today we still see actual modular synthesizers being made, with the latest of being Teenage Engineering's 400 system, where you just buy it, use its CV cables, and patch it up from start to finish, and you'll get a noise out of its speaker. And it's just big and cumbersome for these modular synthesizers. You can see where technology was able to lower down the, why did every time I have to save the patch, take a picture of it, and always have to get that, audio output start to end. That is where the semi-modular synthesizer comes in, where half of it is already written in there, like the envelope. You don't have to punch in the envelope for you or the filter every time. That's connected in the circuit board. And then the CV or whatever method for Korg using Hertz will then give you the extra options of maybe an LFO or a delay or any of that. And hence it's both modular and actually like a built-in synthesizer in a way. And so you could see why new instruments without CVs, whether it's Behringer, is it Behringer or Behringer? I don't know. Gets rid of the CV and puts them into the circuit board, where all you have to do is the knobs, just like the old classic Moog Model D, and the Yamaha DX7, which uses FM synthesis, and by button pressing, you don't have to do CV anymore. So semi-modular is in between those without the CV and with having some CV. And then over time, people started to get nostalgic, or at least older people started to get nostalgic about CV and how you can control the old instruments with the new. And so introducing the Eurorack is itself a modular synthesizer. But this time, each module becomes a third-party commercialized product. That is to say that you have to buy the power case, and you have to buy each module, where it's the oscillator, the envelope, the filter, the amplifier, the sequencer. Any third party, it doesn't belong to one system, and it's not built together. You can detach it like Lego pieces. So it's kind of like a collectible card game at this point. And the market becomes more lucrative, and you can focus your resources on less things, and this gives people more back interested into CV and how CV start to finish can create that flow. So here's what I really want to get at now. There's a criticism I have with people who are into Euroracks, and I don't know where to start, but from my interest, starting off, Euroracks is an expensive hobby. An average Eurorack module will cost you about $100. Maybe a DIY built one or a used one, if you're lucky, is $50 to $70. Either way, it adds up, and you're spending at least $2,000 to have a okay functioning small instrument of some sorts. But people don't even know what it means to be modular, and itself becomes a subcultural interest. For example, this guy's talking about a modular drum machine. Well, from examining his Eurorack units in the said machine, he's got a big 808 clone, which goes for $1,000. He has a bunch of digital percussives that goes to 300 each. That's $1,800. Not to mention all the effects and the cables, and then you're looking at a $4,000 system. Yes, it is expensive, but what is modular if it's emulating an already existing drum machine? I mean, does it have a characteristic? Is it a subgenre of sound? Is it a subculture? And all this is right, and it's correct. And so the consumers have made up their own Eurorack ideology. And this thing I found, this creature that crawled from the Black Lagoon by the name of Dallas Jamming, constantly makes bitter videos about her hypocrisies and how much money she spends on these instruments, and it makes me feel like she's Chris Chan but interested in synthesizers. And she has everything from music as a hobby and she can't make enough money like Jeffrey Epstein. She makes a video about buying and consuming. And then she talks about how she wants to bring more products and less of the gear. She has to spend more because she's a soy boy consumer. And then she's talking about her life and mental health. I wonder why. And so this is hilarious how you have these kind of weirdo types and you see their problems all existing out. And again, this has to do with kind of this trap, this expensive hobby of not understanding. It seems to be something complicated, but it's really easy to understand. I really think this whole sad Eurorack culture really came from the West Coast synthesis project, which isn't bad at all. And I think Don Buchla on the left had it a different way compared to Moog, how to make synthesizers. And he was thinking about adding harmonics or additional noise to the synthesizer. And in the modular synthesizer, Buchla was this avant-garde artist who thought that the synthesizer was more in tune to a psychedelic 60s Andy Looney Ice Pyramid project, and Moog was thinking more in terms of a musical instrument of harmonics. And so some of the newest Eurorack devices kind of break the flow of what I was just saying before, from sequencer envelope to oscillator to filter to amplifier. They think it's like, well, noise to harmonics until you get something random. Well, at that point, you're like Merzbow. You're spending like $3,000, $4,000 just so you can be a noise musician. Which there's easy ways to make noise. I mean, is there quality noise and poor quality noise? And I think people are more into art than they are into music at this point. And this is more geared to the consumer who is interested in subculture and wallpaper. And so I think this bad adding noise modular synthesis technique is disturbing and sadly a bad market trend of what people really have to understand about the modular synthesizer, or synthesizers in general, about control voltage. And you have to remember something: the basis of modular, semi-modular, and Eurorack is it's all about the flow of control voltage. It's a cable that goes start to finish. That's all you have to know, even in a synthesizer without CV. It's all about the flow. You got to get the control voltage cable and make it go from start to finish. That's what you're doing. How you get there? It's like a game book. You turn to page 36, you turn to page 50. Now, can it be an artistic discipline? I'm not so sure. It's like a game book that has multiple endings. We all know what the ending is. It's audio. How can me be putting cables into different outputs will make the noise that, as Reason 12 would like to say, sounds like you? It's very corporate and very sinister, but just think. The cable has a start, has a bunch of swiggle lines, and it ends. That's the Eurorack. It isn't like this make noise product. It isn't this mutable instruments thing. It isn't this noise engineering interesting, effects generator. You're getting an audio signal, which is either analog, digital, it's a sample, it's a noise. You sync them together if it has a clock. And the audio comes out. How you get there. And they're confusing you because they're not telling you how to get there. And really, you got to understand something about the principles of how you get there. That doesn't make you artistic. It doesn't make you more intelligent than any other else. Well, it just makes you understand that the artistic discipline of the modular synthesizer isn't the randomness per se, but the flow of CV. You can get the CV from any source that makes it available. This is what I'm really trying to say. The Korg SQ-64 is about that CV flow. It's not a modular synthesizer, it's a controller. It has CV outputs. It can control anywhere from a semi-modular to a modular to a Eurorack or to any instrument that accepts a CV input-output. And so this is really interesting. Are you really into modular synthesizers because of how pretty the modules are? Or let's be anything that has a CV can be controlled. So ultimately, why get into a modular synthesizer or a Eurorack in the first place if it's all about control? It's about your available control voltage options in a binary yes and no sense. So the questions I'm arising right now is, what does it mean to get into modular synthesizers? Do I like Eurorack, or do I like the concept of control voltage? What makes me express me as an artist? Am I a consumer, or am I an artist? Am I writing a novel here? Am I deciding the fate of my control voltage through the amp, for the filter to the amp to the reverb? What am I doing? How is this my sound? How can I accomplish this root of the CV? And control voltage is what makes a modular, a semi-modular, and a Eurorack possible. not the modules themselves. And so this is what the subculture doesn't understand. They like the pretty rainbow cables. They like the expensive instruments, but that doesn't really sound like you. It really is the process of getting those cables like a max MSP program and understanding start to finish where it goes. And now we must have to ask, is that really an artistic discipline to get the cables to show that what you're doing is really smart and different from other people? Or is it like a boring choose your own game adventure book where there's only 5 endings and you're constantly choosing ending 3 over and over again? Maybe you'll choose ending 2 one time, but you're always choosing ending 3. People are interested in the options of what the control voltage has. About 20 years ago, before the whole control voltage Eurorack thing exploded in the late 2000s, it's only been around for 30 years, right? Before then, people, at least in the 90s and 2000s, before that Eurorack shift, there were groove boxes of Roland MC101 and Korg Electribes and Zox boxes, and all you had to do was get a basic MIDI cable, put it through the in and through the out. Everything had the TR style 64 steps, percussion from bass, snare, hi-hat, close hi-hat. You press the buttons, you press play, and you perform live. And this guy I like, Abadroza, who I've been listening to since I was 18, he still makes videos. He has a Korg EM1, a Korg ES1 sampler, and a Zox box, a TB303 clone. And he just presses play, records the audio output, and it's all going once. It is a performance device. And it's a performance device without the hassle of all the CV. And so the modern Eurorack is a device that gives us all these options than just pressing play, but by where the CV is going. And maybe I'll have like a start clock button and I have the CV out into the sequencer and I press play and I'm getting like a different CV. It's all about what third-party Eurorack modules I buy or on the modular synthesizer itself. And this was where we can understand sound design. Or is it more about sound design or is it about the performance? And here, Abadroza has the performance of what's in the minimalism of these machines and how I can perform this kind of fun, acid house, trancey setup compared to, say, a Buchla make noise, West Coast noisy synth, right? What does it mean, to be a sound designer with third-party instruments? And look back in the 90s where, Abadroza was doing this in the late 2000s. And think about today how Eurorack's modulars are expensive, and are we being pretentious here? Are we saying that we're like pretending we're 70s hippie giants? What is the subculture that is being attached to each other? Abadroza, the b-boy acid house guy versus mustache, hipster, craft beer drinking Buchla guy, right? That's making noise. I'm an artist. I'm not a musician. So think, the rudimentary understanding of the modular synthesizer is the flow of control voltage, start to finish. It is up for the artist, the musician, to decide where those cables go. So class dismissed, and thanks for listening.